Hey guys, welcome back to another stream. This is very impromptu, unplanned. It kind of reminds me about the streams we used to do ahead of the Chelsea games, except now nobody really gives a shit about the Chelsea games tonight because there's much more going on. Never a dull day at Chelsea. Obviously, this is quite a sensitive topic, so we're going to try to handle it with as much care and just giving you guys the facts, what we know, what we can expect, and giving our opinion on the situation. But first off, Jay, one of my best friends, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's been a while. I always tell people being on your channel is my favorite channel to be on, and I do mean that. So yeah, I'm happy to be here. It's a shame it's going to be a tough conversation, but we're interested to see what people have to say anyway.
Yeah, so guys, feel free to put your thoughts in the comments, please, please, please. I urge you to keep it respectful in the comments. This is a difficult time for everybody involved. But let's just get on with it. I don't really know how to get started, but we're just going to go for it. So today, the UK government has announced that they are sanctioning Roman Abramovich, and this means that his assets have been seized in the UK, and one of his biggest assets, of course, is Chelsea FC. Obviously, he announced a week or so-ish ago that he was going to sell the club, and that really puts this on hold for the time being. There is a bit of a loophole that we'll get into. But Jay, what are your initial thoughts on the news?
I'm not surprised that he's been sanctioned. I think everyone who was really looking at that's such a crazy message. I'm not surprised. I don't think many people were overly surprised that Rome was going to get sanctioned because his name was on the list and they were going through that list and sanctioning people. Chelsea are one of Roman's assets, so obviously it was going to impact Chelsea at some point. I think people were hoping that a deal could go through, but you know, a club worth 2-3 billion, a deal like that can't go through very quickly. So it takes time, regardless of what you do. But yeah, I think it's a real shame how it's impacting Chelsea. I understand to a certain extent why Chelsea are being limited, because he benefits directly from Chelsea financially, right? That is an obvious link, that the money Chelsea get, Roman will in some way benefit from it because he is the owner. I understand that. But what I don't understand is it seems as though, and I guess this is where all of the Chelsea conspiracy theorists come from, is like, especially we'll move on to 3 in a bit, but I don't really understand why. Well, I just don't understand the 3 bit. I think that's the bit I don't understand. That makes no sense to me, apart from the fact that they can't sell shirts. So do they miss out on money or something like that? But yeah, it's a bit crazy. It's a shame because on the pitch, contract issues are apparent at the moment. Rudiger being the prime example. If he can't extend his contract, it's going to be a massive shame.
Yeah, so there's like a lot to break down, and let's go piece by piece. Probably the most recent piece that maybe not everybody watching this knows is that 3 just announced that they are suspending their sponsorship with Chelsea. Chelsea will not be allowed to use 3's logo anymore. I saw this tweet that somebody was sent to like go pick up shirts, like blue shirts today. I don't know what the club is going to be wearing, if it's going to be like a training kit, if it's going to be a kit without the 3 logo. I have no idea. They're not allowed anymore to wear 3's shirt. Jay and I were messaging about this, and for me personally, I don't understand how this makes sense, because I feel like it is really it really affects Chelsea, and Chelsea didn't do anything. And so if you guys in the comments have any insight as to why they would do this, I would love to know. Maybe they just want to stay away from all of the controversy that is Chelsea right now. With
I think they're jumping ship. They're jumping ship, aren't they? In the sense of like, before things get worse, or if there's a possibility that things get worse, then they don't want to be involved. And I understand it, but yeah, it doesn't make much sense, because I think Chelsea will be fine. I genuinely do. I think Chelsea will be bought by someone else, because who wouldn't want to buy Chelsea? Same as pretty much any Premier League team, right? Let alone Chelsea. It depends whether Roman opts to sell. And if he chooses to sell, like, I know it's a bit controversial, early mate, but I've not always been the most ardent Roman Abramovich supporter for various reasons. And that's, that rings true today as it did a year ago. But the whole narrative around how much Roman loves the club, I think, will surface more so if he chooses to sell. Because if he sells, obviously he takes that financial hit because the money will go through the government. But it will mean that Chelsea can bounce back quickly. If he decides to fight in the courts or whatever he does, then this process of Chelsea sanctions will be drawn out, and it will affect the club massively. So I think Roman will probably sell. I really do. I think he'll accept that loss, and we'll just have to move on, because it is for the best of the club. And I think he's aware how well his reputation can be managed by doing the right thing at Chelsea. He's very, very good at managing his image, albeit recently it's fallen apart. But he knows what the right image choice is more often than not, and I think if he chooses to sell Chelsea, which I think he probably will, that will mean that his image is kept intact, and he's still got many other billions to keep him safe.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the questions that I had, so guys, to give you background, Roman Abramovich currently cannot sell Chelsea Football Club. That he was trying to sell Chelsea with the sanctions. He can't. His assets are frozen. Chelsea would need to apply for a special license that would allow the UK government, I believe, Jay, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. It would allow the government to basically manage the sale of Chelsea and the proceeds of that sale as they wish. Some questions that I have, Jay, maybe does this mean that the government can essentially just decide who to sell Chelsea to, and then they just get to decide what to do with the money? They can use it for whatever.
It's at points like this I wish we had Joe Tweedy on, because he would have the insight.
Let me message him, because I was texting him literally right now. So
he would have that information to a T. But presumably so. I believe that's the case. If they're able to manage the sale, then they're able to choose who it is sold to. I assume. So yeah, I think that's where things currently stand. I have been looking at the comments. I think there's a bit too much doom mongering in here. I think people are a little bit too afraid. And one, don't be scared of change. It's fine. And two, Chelsea will still be a football club. Like, even if Chelsea aren't trophy winners, and that's the worst case scenario, is Chelsea become a top six club or a Premier League club, then you should still support Chelsea, right? If you're a Chelsea fan. If you support Chelsea because they win trophies, then respectfully, see you later if you choose to go, because that's crazy.
I know. I think it's just like the future is so uncertain, and it's just like a difficult time for me. I'm just like, I feel so bad for the staff, who people are getting laid off, people who work in the hotel, in the mega store, the ground staff, the fans who aren't going to be allowed to purchase tickets anymore. I mean, I feel that there's so many other people affected by this, and that a sale needs to be sorted quickly. One of the other things that you mentioned was the contract situation. So as it stands right now, Chelsea cannot buy players. They cannot sell players. They cannot do any contract negotiation. Azpilicueta, Christensen, and Rudiger all are out of contract at the end of this season. Christensen, I'm not worried about, because he's already decided to go to Barcelona. So I made my peace with that. Aspie, I think, is going to Barcelona as well, and I kind of made my peace with that as well. But Rudiger was one who I thought for sure was going to leave a couple of months ago, and then it seemed that contract negotiations were doing better, and I was really hopeful that he would stay at the club, and now it's looking like he could leave on a free. And also, with the uncertainty around Chelsea, maybe these players want to jump ship and get to more stability. And Joe Tweedy is going to be joining.
Is he? Okay, great. No, the thing that comforts me about this is Tuchel has said he's staying. Fabulous. That is so important. So important. And like he said about Christensen recently, you know, there's no club bigger than Chelsea, really. Barcelona, fair, but like, can you do more at Barcelona than you can at Chelsea currently? I don't think so, and I think everyone is aware of that. Despite them actually being very good under Xavi, Rudiger's a problem because he's a top 5 defender in the world,
Yeah.
and he can pretty much go wherever he likes. But it seems if he wants to go for the money, then he can go to Newcastle if that's what he wants. But I do actually think he wants to stay at Chelsea. Otherwise, I think he probably would have signed a pre-contract elsewhere in January. It would be really odd to not do that and leave it until the summer. But, you know, he may do that. I think it will be on everyone's priority list is what happens with Rudiger. I think Jorginho and Kante run out of contract next year too, as does Thiago Silva. So, you know, that's a problem. However, Chelsea have saleable assets. You know, for example, you can sell Lukaku in 18 months for 50 million, probably. You know, you can sell Timo Werner in 6 months, 12 months for 30 million. We've got loads of deadwood, loads of players that just won't fit in the team. You can bring back Brozier and Gallagher, which is perfect anyway, and Colwell. That the plan was all 3 of them to get a chance, I think, anyway, which is basically a better transfer window than most teams could afford. And that we're just recalling players. Like, it is okay. We have a good manager, good players, and I think it will rock the players, but I believe there are personalities in there that are able to deal with it and to sort of say, let's just focus on what happens on the pitch and then move from there, because the players have no real control over any of this, but their job is to play well and win the game, right? If they win the game, then the job's done. And actually, the best thing for Chelsea today would be to win tonight.
I really hope that they do win, but I feel like we are always playing when there's like some massive Chelsea news breaking and we play that night, which is really unfortunate. It'll be interesting to see like how this game goes given all of the drama around Chelsea today. One of the other things that was mentioned as part of this was the fact that Chelsea will only have £20,000, I believe,
Yeah.
for away travel.
It's funny, isn't it? That actually makes me laugh. That one. I think that's funny.
Why do you think it's funny?
Can you imagine all the Chelsea players in economy class on like an easy jet flight?
Yeah, I'll just be like trying to get on the same flight as them. Like,
Yeah,
here you go.
or they're all like carpooling up the motorway in the UK. That's hilarious. I mean, stuff like that. It disrupts the football, but fucking just drive. Like if
If
it's
it's a Champions League game, though,
fair, but then like, oh no, you'll have to pay for your own hotel. Like you still earn, you're still getting paid wages.
yeah.
They're not financially struggling people. They can afford to pay for flights and a hotel. Like do you know what I mean? Like, I think those issues will be focused on too much, even though it is a problem. But they're just a minor sanction or issue, right? There's still budget there, but it's not much compared to obviously Chelsea used to 5-star hotels and private jets. It's like, oh no, you can't go on your private jet for a few weeks. Like, I don't really have much sympathy for that kind of issue, but like, yeah, just pay for your own flights if it's really a problem. You know what I mean?
It's actually like mad when you think about like some of these players, like Timo Werner's making 270K a week. Like that's actually insane.
And buy your own
Uh,
plane. Do you know what I mean? Like that's fine. That's totally okay. I mean, I think a point to look at as well, and credit where it's due to Rob Pratley, who raised it on the timeline. First one to raise it I saw anyway, that was not letting tickets be sold and only season ticket holders there is great, because season ticket holders can still go, but it's also really not great because other people can't go. And what football does is it provides an escapism. There's a lot of talk around Chelsea as a business. at the moment, and rightly so, because this business is being sold. But football clubs are sort of ethereal in the way that they work. They're not like any other institution, because they attack your emotions, and you pay with your finances. So they cover both, and this time can really upset people. And I know it's not, I know the government and that won't care whether Chelsea fans are upset or not, but it will be genuinely upsetting for a lot of people. And a lot of people don't like uncertainty. And Ellie, I know for as long as you've supported Chelsea, you've known no different to Roman Abramovich. I was 5 years old when Roman Abramovich bought Chelsea, so I literally know no different. And people don't like the change. I think there is opportunity here for a new owner, a new model, a new way of things being done. I think a fear of change is normal. And everything that's going on at the moment is going to cause people to one, put their opinion out there, and two, a lot of information will be spread around, and it will take days and weeks for things to be sorted out, for buyers to be sorted, and all of that stuff that Joe will fill us in on much better than I can. But at the end of the day, let's just, I don't know. It's hard to say let's focus on the positives, because there's not many, but there will be groups that are unifying more so than ever, fans unifying more so than ever. My dad phoned me today, said amongst all this stuff, it makes me want to support the club even more. And all those people, I think, that are worried that Chelsea are going to cease to exist is absolutely crazy. And I think, I tried to be balanced, I tried to be articulate, but at the end of the day, I'd support Chelsea if they're in the conference. I would support them if they're a non-league team, because that's what you do with your football club. Like, you have to kind of firm it when times are tough, unfortunately, and just stick by it.
I'm really glad that I have both of you guys on. Joe, thanks so much for joining in such short notice as well. But two of the most level-headed people that I know from Chelsea Twitter. So Joe, thank you for joining on such short notice, and give us your initial reaction. Jay and I have talked a bit about it, but we were literally saying Joe Tweedy would be the best person to have on, because he could provide way more insight than we can. So thank you.
Can you hear me okay, first of all?
Yes.
Yeah.
Super. Okay. I think since the start of this whole situation, this has felt, I think, somewhat inevitable in terms of the sanctions being issued against Abramovich. Curious enough, there were articles from the National Crime Agency perspective that they had been investigating the owner for, I think, about 4 years, in terms of looking for potential ways to sanction him, to bring him to some sort of justice. And their conclusion recently was that there wasn't anything that they could really sort of use against him. And that's part of the reason that he wasn't part of the first wave of sanctions, the second wave of sanctions, and partly why this new economic crime bill that's gone through is kind of, I suppose, one of the initial pieces of legislation that is going to trap some of these outliers that they're looking for here. So I think, given that he is probably the most prominent Russian oligarch, or when you think of the word oligarch, you associate it with Abramovich, there was always, I think, some inevitability that he would get dragged into it. Now, this isn't to debate things that I think he may or may not have done in the past historically, but it certainly has felt like a very targeted approach on him. And really, I think the outcome was always going to be this way, that he would be sanctioned. Interestingly enough, I think his approach, or his offer to sell the club, the sort of dissolution of the $1.5 billion debt, selling the club in terms of those net profits going to a charity, I think that has kind of backfired a tiny bit in terms of his intention. The government are quite clearly, well, at least in my opinion, I think, coming sort of stuff that's been confirmed by journalists, they're looking to essentially oversee the sale, manage the sale. I don't think they want any of the proceeds of that transaction to go anywhere other than a UK bank account owned by the Treasury, so they can have complete visibility on what is there and where those funds eventually go. Which, I mean, from a government perspective, is an intelligent thing to do. For people that have actually read the sanctions document that came out this morning, I noticed how Sky in particular were focusing on the first paragraph, which is very heavy-handed towards Abramovich and really paints the picture that they want to. If you read the entire piece of text in its entirety, the links to the company that they're referring to, it's a lot of ifs and maybes, and we think that this might have happened and stuff of that nature, which, Jay, given that he's a writer, editor, will know. Certainly, obviously, there is a way to slant certain things in that particular favour. So that portion of it, where it seems quite speculative. I would imagine, and again, this is me being perhaps a little bit cynical, they know from Abramovich's statement that he doesn't necessarily want to drag the club through some protracted process where the reputational damage that's being done to the club, the financial damage to the club is long-standing. And I think that they are gambling on his genuine affection for the club, knowing that he will now probably sort of, let's say, agree to a quick-fire sale at a reduced cost. If you want to go really down the rabbit hole, you can look at certainly some of the names they're being linked to, which political parties they donate to, who the current UK government is. I won't do that on this sort of stream here, but this isn't, and Jay will conclude. Jay's same nationality as I am. Will conclude this isn't exactly a squeaky clean government. And we won't go down that path, but the methodology behind the sanctions, the way that they've approached it. And ultimately, we're seeing reports now. Certainly, I've seen things from Pat Nevin emerging recently that the people that are being hit hardest by this is not Abramovich. Abramovich is going to be a billionaire. He's worth £10 billion. He's still got super yachts. He's moved all his money out of the country. The club is his last sort of real tangible link to the UK. It's going to be all of the event staff. It's going to be the megastore staff, people who are working on minimum wage, cleaners, people at the club who are going to be sort of really impacted by this the longer it goes on, not being paid. And as I said, I think Nevin was alluding to on 5 Live that people have actually started to be almost softly released from contracts and from jobs, which, if the intended is to, try and actually draw this back to what this is about, which is a Russian illegal invasion of Ukraine, that intended outcome seems so far removed from what is actually the cause of this. And I think ultimately it's performative politics from people in the UK. It's grandstanding. Whatever sort of the real kind of motives behind all the stuff that's happening truly are, they've been laser focused on Abramovich, and ultimately it seems like they've invested more time, effort and energy into getting anything they can against him to push through this sort of sanctions list. And I'm not even sure what the visa count is at the UK for Ukrainian refugees. It might be less than 1,000 at this point. So, more should be done to really tangibly help Ukrainian people, and I think there should be a lot less on the grandstanding side of things. But insofar as the club goes, I think now the consortium, and it does feel like a consortium, will buy the club, whether it's a US-backed sort of entity or hedge funds with investment people and some sports people, etc. I don't think at the moment the makeup is as important as what I would have thought if Roman was controlling the sale. It's about, I think, transferring the ownership and trying to get the club under some semblance of normality as soon as possible, because ultimately, yes, we all want to sign players and what's happening with contracts and stuff, but there's a lot more at play here. As I said, you've got regular people at Chelsea who are losing jobs, who are not going to necessarily be able to afford their rent at the end of the month because of the sanctions that are in place on the club. And it's when you get down to that level, that's when it starts to irritate me quite profoundly that there are people who have absolutely nothing to do with any of this situation who are being impacted. We can talk about the structure of the club and all that sort of stuff, but it kind of pales a little bit into insignificance when I just feel at the moment there are people using an incredibly tragic and horrific situation, an unprecedented situation, certainly in modern Europe, as a sort of point-scoring exercise and an exercise to treat Abramovich as some sort of parading unicorn that they can sort of string out and act as if they've been doing a ton of really good work, when, as I said, the reality is the real tangible things that the UK government could and should have been doing, they failed quite miserably over the past couple of weeks.
Can I add to that as well? I think,
yeah, of course.
Firstly, it's from I read on Sky News a few hours ago, it's just over 1,000 visas they've handed out, which is terrible. But what was I going to say? I was going to say that I had a really good point and I've forgotten it.
No.
I can't remember what I was going to say, but I will remember in a second.
We're gonna change the topic. It'll be 15 minutes later, and then you'll be like, "Oh yeah, I remember what I was going to say." No,
it's completely gone. It's completely gone.
Bummer. No worries. Joe, thanks so much for that insight.
I remember what I was going to say.
Yes.
I was going to say that what's really important to establish as well in this conversation, and I think that we'd all agree on this, is, despite your opinions of Roman, I know Joe and I have had conversations before where I've had to sort of ask questions because I've never been sure or looked into things certain ways, been really helpful. But I'm conscious that if you defend Roman on social media, you're going to be attacked, or like people are going to tarnish you with this brush of, you're backing him, so you must believe in this and you must think this way. And actually, I think even people that have not been convinced about Roman over the last few weeks or months or years, whatever, as a Chelsea owner, I think everyone should be able to say, well, actually, the way that he's being targeted and the way that the conversation is being manipulated, as Joe said, the way you can slightly, or the way you can, use language is like an alchemy in language, right? And the way you can sort of manipulate it very, very delicately. I think it is a bit strange, and like like Joe said there, the worst thing is that there will be people who day to day work at Chelsea, and they're gonna struggle for the time being, and hopefully there is a plan for them.
Yeah, no, definitely. Do you guys see the club being sold in a quick manner at this point? I know that they were trying to sell it quickly, but now it seems like every day the value is going to be plummeting, and it really affects everybody, from, like you said, just daily workers who aren't going to be able to make rent because of this. So do you see Roman selling quickly and the government sorting this quickly?
Putting my portfolio management head on here, so looking into putting my banking hat on, if I am a potential buyer of Chelsea, if I have that level of funding from a consortium or an individual basis, I am letting this play out for as long as possible, to let the asset depreciate as much as possible, to buy it. I think at the moment there is also a sort of a little bit of uncertainty around the write-off aspect of the 1.5 billion, which obviously massively changes the valuation of the club. If that is built into a sale price, that significantly alters the price. So I think the way people to look at this is there are three elements in terms of this transaction. There is the 1.5 billion, which was being written off. How is that going to be treated? If that's a complete write-off or a gift, I'm unsure how that is from a legal standpoint in terms of being a benefit to the owner. Plus the actual transaction price of the club. We know that he rejected a 2.2 billion pound offer a couple of years ago, so that's 3.7 million pounds all in. And then you're looking anywhere between 1 and 2 billion pounds to make it a semi-viable business to redevelop the stadium. So you're looking at 3.7, 4.7, nearly 6 billion pound. Let's say between 4 to 6 billion pound is a conservative estimate or bracket, for somebody to come in, buy the club, take care of the outstanding debt. Maybe that's rolled into a sale price, and then also redevelop the stadium. If the 1.5 billion goes away, that obviously makes it a lot more palatable. But that 2.2 billion pound figure, that evaluation that was rejected a couple of years ago from Jim Ratcliffe, if I'm sensible and I have that kind of money, and I'm assuming, again, these people are going to be business people. If they are consortiums or hedge funds, they are going to know the numbers. They're going to know how this is going to trickle down as an asset. That evaluation could trend to 1.5 billion. It could be closer to £1 billion. From Roman's perspective, I have the feeling that he would like to get out of the UK as quickly as possible and try to sort of move on with whatever the remainder portion of his business career or whatever sort of things he's going to do sort of post Chelsea. At the moment, and again, I think where I had some reservations about the timing of all of this stuff today. He is one tangible asset, and okay, I appreciate that it's a very large tangible asset in the UK, away from being three from effectively the UK's kind of sort of tenterhooks, or the ability to really sanction him and it means something. So I have a feeling that from his perspective, he would like to sell as quick as possible. The way that he was going about the bidding process was as if it was technically a seller's market, it's more probably a buyer's market at this moment in time. You want to take all of the bids in, you want to evaluate them, and you want to hand it over. I still believe that he did want to hand it over to somebody who genuinely wanted to invest in the club and take it to sort of the next level. I don't sort of doubt anything that he said in terms of that affection for the football club. What we have now is probably going to be a group of people who can present the most aggressive and the most viable option to the UK government, because in theory, they are the people negotiating on behalf of the club now. That could mean a consortium who are going to buy Chelsea on lots of leveraged debt, which is sort of how Manchester United have been purchased, how lots of sports companies or sports franchises are bought in America. which potentially could cripple the club. People have seen, or maybe have seen Swiss Ramble, his recent sort of Twitter thread about Chelsea's finances. This notion that we are self-sufficient has been a bit of a non-starter for a long time. So you're having to find somebody who is willing to kind of underwrite the club's losses and to sort of continue the success. Most billionaires, particularly ones who own hedge funds or have some sort of financial background, very unlikely just to want to buy a sports franchise or buy a sports club in the UK to just underwrite those losses and continue working in the same manner. With Roman sort of having Chelsea as a hobby and not sort of a business, that was always going to be the case, that he was quite happy to do that. So there's lots of, I think, unanswered questions, particularly, as I say, I have a feeling that a consortium, whether it's the Todd Boehly one or whether it's whoever it's going to be, yes, they will bring some expertise in, but the way that they buy the club, I want people to pay attention to that. If you see the word debt or loans or bonds or whatever it might be, that should be an immediate red flag. That is kind of really what's led Manchester United into the situation they are in now. The amount of interest and debt they have to pay every single season just to continue financing the club. Yes, obviously they're much bigger than Chelsea. They can still spend money on players, but we don't have anywhere near their ability to bring in that sort of revenue. So that's one thing to sort of be mindful of now, is that we're less likely to get a preferential owner, somebody who might be somebody that Roman was quite happy to sell to, somebody that is going to invest a ton of their own money and capital and keep the club sort of where it is. Being more business focused isn't a bad thing. There are lots of areas of the club, and I think Jay and I have spoken about these privately and also on podcasts, where I think we could do an absolute ton more, particularly when it comes to recruitment. Having a more intelligent way of running that side of the club is no mean feat, but also something that should be invested in. And commercially as well, you have to wonder whether Chelsea have really capitalised on their status over the past couple of years as a preeminent club. Yes, we've done some pretty decent deals. We've got a pretty interesting brand strategy where we don't target top tier brands. We go for kind of secondary brands, Hyundai, Carabao versus Red Bull and whoever else is going to be in that sort of bracket, because they're more willing to pay to be partnered with Chelsea rather than a bigger brand. I still think there's more that we could be doing there. Maybe we don't need to go down the Manchester United route of literally having a printer sponsor, but there are sort of things that we could potentially be doing that would help in that area. So business focus is fine. I think if they come in and revolutionise the recruitment department, that would be a positive. But I think as Chelsea fans, we have to come to terms with, and I think this is why I came onto the stream and was listening to Jay talk about how things are going to change. This is going to be something that is a little bit more like a Liverpool, possibly in the best case scenario, or you could see us dropping to like an Arsenal sort of mid-table level. Or Manchester United kind of fall from grace from being perennial Premier League challengers to a team who are lucky to qualify for Champions League. There's quite a big gap here. A lot of that will come down to the skill of the owner, who they hire. We're in an infinitely better place squad-wise, I think, than when Klopp came into Liverpool as sort of a parallel. We've got much better foundations, a better academy. We have a better core of players, a better core of younger players. So we're not as far behind. But the days where we can go in and Roman can just drop £100 million on a centre forward who doesn't score goals, those are probably going to be, those are in the past. So it has to be based around intelligent recruitment, continuing the pathway for the better younger players. I'm optimistic to the point that I think having somebody, particularly who maybe has learned the lessons of the Liverpool owners, why it took them so long to get into the position they are, taking practices that work in American sports and trying to apply them to Premier League football. I think that if they can learn that refined process and implement that quicker, then it's not necessarily a bad thing. I think Liverpool's model is probably something that Chelsea could aim for in terms of that recruitment and being a bit more intelligent with things we do. That's sort of maybe the best case scenario here. But the days, I think, of us being able to just bankroll money and throwing money at players that don't even play games for us anymore is probably over. So unless unless you lean into the sort of the narrative around the owner and you go for a petrochemical state, or somebody who is going to have an absolute ton of money, and you just completely dismiss all of the arguments that are being made in that area. So it's a really tricky position, but the sooner the better. And I think the clarity for both fans, but also to say the people that actually work at the club day to day, I think that's a really important thing that I don't want to get lost in the whole grand scheme of this, is that there are people at the moment who are on the cusp of losing their jobs, not being able to work, who are shift workers, whatever it might be. Again, as I say, it feels less about the Ukrainian situation and more about making Abramovich a sort of almost like the pin the tail on the donkey, where you want to pin every single problem on him and use him as your kind of stick to say, or you're kind of put him on a pedestal and say, look what we've done to an oligarch. As I said to Jay, Jay mentioned earlier, the UK hasn't done enough for me, and I would much rather focus our attentions as a country on actually trying to do something that will benefit the people of Ukraine, rather than, as I say, this sort of grandstanding politicking, which is not being useful really to anyone.
Joe, what do you make of 3 dropping Chelsea sponsorship deal? Because Jamie didn't really understand it. We were thinking maybe they just don't want to be associated with like the image of Chelsea right now, but Chelsea.
We've been cancelled, haven't we? We have become part of cancel culture.
Yeah.
It's I think with the Free situation, they are the most publicly, I suppose, visible sponsor on Chelsea's shirt, and maybe they have taken a decision by any sort of associative links to Chelsea, that they're going to suffer some sort of reputational damage as a company. In a very tongue-in-cheek way, I would be quite happy to never see the 3 logo on a Chelsea kit again. Jay is infinitely more sartorially elegant than I am, and I'm sure he can understand my quibbles with having a guy number 3 in the middle of the kit. It was a little bit too much banter happening early in the season, where we were getting beat 3-0, or we were winning 3-0, or we had this weird streak of having 3s in the game. But a slightly more sensible take. I just think it feels a little bit performative from them. I've noted at the moment, again, that this may change, that Nike have basically declined to comment in terms of what's happening. Free, I mean, if they want to suspend partnership with Chelsea, the thing is as well, and again, I'm not sure how well they thought this through. The sponsorship for a club of Chelsea's size, the £40 million a year, feels like a lot of money, but it really pales into comparison to what other mega clubs have got. So on a very, very cheeky basis, if Chelsea maybe use this as a chance to renegotiate or actually get a sponsor that's going to pay more money, it might actually work out okay for us. I'd be curious, and again, not professing to have any sort of legal skill here, but what actual break clauses exist in the sort of the contract that we had. If Three's lawyers are worth their salt, and given sort of when they were being linked with the club and this investigation that's been into Roman since 2018, I'd be curious if they have any break clauses around him being sanctioned or him being targeted as part of investigations. That's what I would imagine a very good legal team would do, given that I'm a Three customer and that I'm very kind of used to their sort of mobile service. I doubt that their lawyers have thought that far ahead in terms of what might happen. I'm curious whether Hyundai or other sort of more prominent partners follow suit. But I think that to Jay's point earlier, the language of the message again from Sky is very much Three are dumping Chelsea, whereas the statement is very much a suspension of relations at the moment. It could be that in a week's time, if a very quick sale is concluded, or 2 weeks' time, that Three are quite happy to be associated with the club again. I wonder how much Chelsea fans or Chelsea as a club will be happy to be associated with Three going forward, given that they have kind of thrown the club under the bus due to obviously something to do with the owner, which is not necessarily a fantastic way to maintain a business relationship post sale. So yeah, I'm curious to see what direction that heads in. But I don't think it feels a little bit playing to the crowd in terms of Free Steps. So I know lots of companies have removed their business from Russia, but the more that this impacts Chelsea as an entity, it's difficult to feel that we are not being directly targeted for something which I'm not trying to trivialize this, but it comes across like we as fans are driving tanks into Ukraine that are painted royal blue that have the Free sponsorship on the side, and we're firing European cups at people. I mean, it's getting to a point where we are being cast in that light. And that is it's insane that we are it's 2022 and we're talking about this as a topic. I'm curious to see where this actually heads. Said if more sponsors pull out, it's going to be problematic for the club, particularly the sanctions. The football license at the moment is incredibly difficult for Chelsea to operate. Really, doesn't feel that there's any real access to cash. There's not enough real money to keep the club going. So yeah, it's something to keep an eye on. If sponsorship money is being pulled, if television money is being held in trust, if whatever is being held without the club having access to it, the longer this goes on, the more problematic it is for all of us.
Yeah. Oh, there's just like so much to digest. I like my mind is just really blank right now because it's just a lot of information at once. Um, the kind of pivoting away from this, Roman has been seized and the day-to-day operations of Chelsea right now, and maybe looking a smidge to the future. And Jay, I'll throw this question to you. Do you see, and given that Chelsea are under new ownership, because otherwise we cannot sell players, but if Chelsea come under new ownership, do you see them trying to get rid of a lot of the high earning players where Chelsea's wage structure is truly backwards, and the reason for why Rudiger wants to try to renegotiate his contract, because the likes of Timo and Lukaku are on 273 over 300 a week, and they're starting on the bench for Chelsea. Kepa as well, 150. Like, that's not sustainable for new ownership. So do you think that we're going to see like this massive exodus this summer, if that's even possible?
No, I don't think so. I think firstly, I don't know exactly how much players earn, so it's hard to say. But like, I think if you're going to buy Chelsea, you know what you're coming into. We've spoken about the culture of the club and the attitude of the club for so long. I think you don't buy Chelsea to not invest and heavily. And Chelsea is a team that's seen as could be the best in the world with a little push. I think, like, obviously it's not a little push; it's a lot of investment and doing it continually, like Roman has. But you don't buy Chelsea to just float. I don't think, whether that happens or not. They could buy it with great intentions of investing and then it not work. That may happen, but I don't know. I don't think that you look at Chelsea and think there's a club that I'll just maintain as a stable, just sort of coaster top four club. I don't think
No,
that's.
but what I'm saying is maybe you can't, like, maybe it's not sustainable with the amount that Roman has been pumping into it. Like, it's
Yeah.
not sustainable to keep buying like 100
This
million
this is what I said though.
isn't going to start.
You can't always spend 100 million, but Chelsea have a lot of really, really good young players, an amazing academy. That whole system has been there for ages. We have an incredible manager who I hope and I believe will stay. I think the team behind him are good. Kai Havertz, Mason Mount, Trevor Chalobah, Reece James, Ben Chilwell, all these guys under 25, Billy Gilmore under 25, Brozier under 25, Colwell under 25. Like, the list literally keeps on going. Harvey Vale on the bench tonight, under 25. He's under 20. Like, Timo Werner's 25. Like, these players who are on long contracts that I think will want to see it out. I hope Tuchel can galvanise them and steady the ship. I think if you're a prospective owner looking at Chelsea, you will come in with the idea to invest. I think otherwise that would be crazy. And I don't know how you'd get away with buying Chelsea that way. And maybe Joe could fill me in on that. I don't know. But yeah, I'm not too worried. I think most people see Chelsea as a super club. And if you buy a super club, you play like a super club. And that means investing and paying high wages, because that's the nature of the game, whether we like it or not. That is the position it's in. If they want to buy Chelsea to just be, a stable, well-run football club, fine. But I'm not sure I can envision that. And I think that would be a really bad idea, because I think a lot of fans would find that frustrating for a while.
Joe, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think the more that I think of why would a hedge fund, why would a consortium of private equity firms or whatever it might be, headed by somebody, come and buy Chelsea, that Super League figure always jumps to the front of my mind, that £400 million in additional revenue. If you were going to buy a club that, we operate on the very fine margins, we're obviously supported enormously by the owner over the past 20 years in terms of propping us up financially. But that £400 million figure becomes very, very reachable, and it obviously would not just plug a hole in Chelsea's finances, but it would generate a really significant sort of revenue profit every single season. I have a feeling that, if you are coming into the club, and I completely agree with Jay, you don't come into Chelsea not knowing the wage situation. I think we've got the second highest wages in the Premier League, if you believe figures that are quoted in publicly. You don't come into Chelsea with a view that you are going to sort of be able to change the culture immediately and get every single financial decision correct. We've made an awful lot of bad ones. and changing that culture will be a recruitment thing. It will become a sort of an operating model thing as well. But if you have a potential ability, and again, maybe this is where the Super League is being pushed. Again, I know obviously we were seeing the reformatted Champions League come into play. But if that revenue is realistic and these people feel that that is a direction that they will take Chelsea or that they will push for, then that to me makes sense from an actual kind of a viable investment perspective, because you can still invest money back into the playing squad. You can be more sensible in terms of how you invest it, do better due diligence on players that you want to sign. That leaves an awful lot of money left over for an owner or whoever to invest. So it comes down to the intentions, and again, this is where I was hoping that Roman could have concluded the sort of sale of the club, because I do think the due diligence that he would do on the potential ownership group would be a lot more than what's going to come from the UK government. And actually, the more I think about them having any sort of day-to-day say in the running of Chelsea, it absolutely terrifies me. So I'm hoping that portion of it is concluded soon. But I think until we know who is buying the club, until we know the situation around the resolution of the finances, the amount of money that's going to be involved, it's very difficult to predict. I think, as I say, there are statements from I think Jim Ratcliffe, a couple of years ago, was saying that he knew that if he was to buy Chelsea, there is another £1 to £2 billion that you need to invest in the stadium over. It's like a 10-year project to make it sort of viable for him as an investment, but also to keep Chelsea competitive with those around them. You cannot compete with a 39, 40, 42,000 capacity or whatever it is that we have these days with seats being removed. Everyone around us is expanding. Even Villa are going to get a new stadium or a new stand. They're going to be at 50, 55, whatever it is capacity. Mm-hmm. You can't compete at the level we are, and people will know that. So they know that there's an investment question on the stadium. They know that they need to invest at a certain level when it comes to the squad. As I say, until I think we have a clear picture on who is actually, or the consortium or whoever it's going to be, I think it's very difficult to predict what's going to happen. Again, when it comes to, I think you're talking about sort of player contracts and things of that nature, fairly certain 2 of the 3 were going to leave anyway. It feels like Azpilicueta was out the door. It feels like Christensen is out of the door. Rudiger, maybe there was some ability to pull that back around, and I completely agree with what you're saying, where you have players who aren't even on the football pitch earning double, treble what you are. It gets a little bit demotivating, particularly given how important Rudiger has been to recent success. But that change of mindset and paying players appropriately and not overpaying and committing and all stuff like that, it's all connected to having a longer term vision of the club. That may be, if we're looking for a real positive, if you're bringing in a new owner, hopefully they can commit to something, even if it's not ideal, but if they commit to a direction for 3 to 5 seasons, at least then we know that when we're signing a player in the summer, 18 months later, he's not going to be redundant because we've changed coaches, gone in a completely different direction. So that for me is, I said, if we're looking for positives with a new ownership group, particularly, if they are business oriented, they're coming from an American sports background where recruitment and drafting and all that sort of stuff is very prominent, you're hoping that they come with a model that can come in and genuinely improve the club in that respect, because that will be where we can catch up City and Liverpool when we hopefully recruit better that year.
Yeah, I think that has been like our recruitment has been like a massive talking point, that we're always buying these players and like these attackers that are meant to be like the solution to our attacking problem, and then they don't fit in. And then you see like Liverpool, every player that they buy is like very pointed, and they bought Diaz, and he fits right into their attack. He's been brilliant for them. And I was thinking, when's the last time that Chelsea realistically, like, besides Mendy, because I think that he's like a diamond in the rough and he was like an incredible buy, but besides him, when's the last time that Chelsea realistically did that? Maybe N'Golo Kante was 30 million. Other than that, I can't think so much of it.
The tricky thing, just to really jump in quickly, Ellie, very, very quick point on that. The thing with Liverpool and why they're so successful is they've had this 7-year period of refining what it is they think works as a Liverpool player. I think when you're scouting a player, you're maybe putting up 2, 3, maybe 4 years worth of reports. It's very difficult to then, if you've got 2 years of information on a player, when the new coach comes in or whatever and tries to kind of go in a different direction, all of your reports, all of your player recommendations are potentially sort of rendered useless. And when you've got players, as you say, like Diaz and Jota, players that they've signed internally, but also externally, they're model to what they're recruiting for. They know the Klopp system inside out. They know the profile of players that he's after. I think it's hopefully it's going to be easier to recommend to what Tuchel wants if we know that he's going to be the coach long term, or at least the system or style of play is going to be consistent. As you say, we keep spending big money on particularly on attackers. I mean, that £300 million invested in Lukaku, Werner, Havertz, Pulisic, Ziyech, etc. You question whether that could have been better spent. It probably could have. And that's sort of the thing that I want to try and get Chelsea out of this circle of investing, spending tons of money on a single player to then see them become redundant, before even their first contracts come up. And just a question for both of you here, which is I've been asking a lot of people recently. In the past 5-6 years, if you can think of more than one player or maybe more than two players who have been good every single season for the first, say they've signed a 5-year deal, every 5 years that they've been a good player for Chelsea, it's really difficult because even players who are playing well now weren't playing well in phases of the club.
That's what I got.
Yeah, exactly. It's Kante, yeah, and maybe Thiago Silva, but again, that's a free. It's not an investment.
He's not been there long enough either, really, for your question.
Yeah, so it's Kante, and then when you think about, we can't even get the full utility out of a player over the first contract that they sign with the club. That's where the be all and end all of this whole kind of recruitment stuff stops. You can't sign players and then they become not useless but redundant, and they don't fit the system. They don't fit what we want to do. Literally a season and a half later, because you then have 3.5 years of contract to pay, and it's 3.5 years of them kind of not necessarily fitting in the squad and not playing as you would intend.
So to try to put this in a positive spin, perhaps, as much as possible, do you think that this could give Chelsea the opportunity to really build and grow something and maybe stick with Thomas Tuchel? Because something that I've been critical of is the club just sacking managers at the first sign that it goes poorly. And Thomas Tuchel has kind of shown that he has what it takes to take Chelsea to the highest of levels. Do you think that this will allow Tuchel to grow with Chelsea? And I know that Jamie Carragher put out an article, I think, for the Telegraph saying like, "Oh, United should go for Thomas Tuchel." I was just like, what in the world? But Jay, I'll throw that question to you first.
Can you ask it again, please?
You're not paying attention to me. No, do you think that the club, do you think that this now will allow Thomas Tuchel to grow with the club and to maybe that we don't have this revolving door of managers?
I think it would be really rare if we were to have another owner that implemented that system, because it's just so rare generally. I think a lot, there are clubs, that operate on a strict rotation of, if you don't win, leave. I think of the Pozzos, if that's how you pronounce it. They're probably the worst for it. The Watford and Udinese owners, they love sacking managers. But I do hope that Tuchel can stay, because I think he'll be a really helpful person to have around. He evidently seems to have a real affinity for this team, this squad. The fans have bought into him, and he's unified a fan base which really struggles to be unified. So I hope Tuchel stays, and yeah, I hope he's given the chance to really sink his teeth into this project.
Yeah, I do too. Just to kind of tie it up, how important is it that Chelsea win the game today? It must be really difficult for any player to focus on this. Lukaku also not in the starting 11 yet again. I'm happy that Tuchel at least is gave him a run of games and then said, okay, this isn't working, and changed it. And now we see that Havertz is performing brilliantly. But Joe, how important is it that Chelsea win this game to try to essentially shut everybody up? I don't know how to say it nicely.
It's strange. I think the Luton game and today are probably two of the games that I will care least about ever in the history of Chelsea. There's so much obviously more to play at stake, certainly for fans at the moment, from a very selfish perspective. wouldn't surprise me if we go to Norwich today and do a very Chelsea thing of just turning up and putting 5 or 6 on them. Wouldn't surprise me if we get beat 5 or 6. You know, it feels like it's one of those games where it's difficult to really judge what the temperature is and the mood of the squad is. Insofar as Lukaku goes, and again, this is me trying to come up with very extreme ways of looking for positives. When we have new ownership, that investment isn't necessarily tied to them. So there is a way that possibly he could move on in the summer. Maybe it's one of these sort of Quadrado style loans where you loan him for like 700 years and you just sort of run down the contract, and there's an understanding that he stays at Inter, whatever it might be. But yeah, I think the Tuchel has, I think quite rightfully, nailed his colours to the Kai Havertz ship. Havertz is, from a numbers perspective, doing, I think, better than expected, certainly recently. But he makes the team play better. And I know we're bringing this back to a football conversation now, but his work rate, his ability to run the channels, to press from the front, he does everything that I've thought a Thomas Tuchel centre forward will want to do. I think he needs to develop, he needs to mould, he needs to become a more consistent finisher. There are obviously parts of his game that he needs to focus on. But what he's doing now, and again, largely I think he was doing at the back end of last season when I think he was playing well for us, he's starting to, I think, influence games regularly. And that's not just scoring goals. I think his movement, instead his interaction with players around him, his combination play, he's actually seems to be getting better performances out of guys like Christian Pulisic around him, for example, seems to play well with Havertz in the team. And that's it for me. I just think that now we're going to see the remainder of the season, serious games. I think Havertz will play, and our £100 million centre forward is going to be playing against the Chesterfields and the Macclesfield Towns of this world, as cannon fodder. Again, maybe there's an argument to say that they will rotate given on certain opponents that we have. But at the moment, just in terms, I think the overall way that Chelsea play, Havertz, even if he's not scoring, just the fact that he's so much more mobile and aggressive off the ball, which is a massive, massive feature of Tuchel's team. I think that by virtue of him being much better defensively, that he just makes the team play better. And I think they play better with him as well. It's just one of those things. And as I say, with Lukaku, it's a shame it hasn't worked out. I don't think he's necessarily helped himself at times this season with obviously things that we don't need to retread on this stream. But sometimes things don't work out. I would have, maybe argue that there should have been a lot more of a deeper dive on him as a player coming back to Chelsea, whether he fits stylistically, whether he fits the league, whether the way that he scores goals in Inter is the same way that Chelsea can play. All these sorts of questions that you would normally ask. I don't necessarily feel that we did. But again, I'll end on something positive. If he is the use case for the new ownership on how not to recruit, then hopefully that's a positive going forward, because I think you can use him as an example of just seeing a good player and thinking good player equals good performance in the Chelsea shirt. There has to be, I think, a little bit more of an intelligent assessment behind that. And I don't think that was the case there. So yeah, nothing gets wrong. I'm sure he's still a lovely chap. But I think in terms of his future at Chelsea, it just feels like, certainly with Tuchel's selections, Havertz is playing the big games. He's starting the finals. He is the sort of the choice now. That kind of feeling that he's wedded to Lukaku is dissipating, and I'd be surprised if Lukaku is here next season, even with all of the chaos that's going on around us.
Interesting. That's very interesting. Yeah, I kind of wonder, like, knowing the way that Chelsea play, knowing how we won the Champions League, and then knowing how Lukaku plays, it just doesn't add up. It really doesn't. And I don't know. Let's see what happens. To end the stream, I wanted to say thank you so much for this super chat. I really appreciate it. And it means even more that it's from a United fan, because we have been getting absolute shit from rival fans, and it sucks. It really sucks to see, because I wouldn't wish this on any football club. It's really sad and a depressing time, and I just try to keep it positive and bring you guys the news and as much information as possible. But to end it on a high note, yeah, Chelsea will bounce back from this. There was a Chelsea before Roman. There will be a Chelsea after Roman. And like I kind of said at the end of the day, like, it's football and there's a lot more important things going on in the world right now. But thank you so much for this message, because it was very sweet and it really made the stream. I really appreciate it. So guys, I hope that you enjoyed this. We have the match coming up in a little under half an hour. If you enjoyed this stream, lots more to come. Make sure to like it, drop it a comment so other people can find my channel. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And a massive thank you to my 2 guests who joined really last minute for me, since this was just breaking news. I really appreciate it. So Jay, I'll go to you first, and then Joe, I'll go to you to let everybody know where they can find you.
Oh, don't worry about finding me. Just subscribe to Ellie's YouTube channel. I think that's the most important thing here. Do that. Don't worry. You're not missing much on my tweets. I don't tweet as often as maybe I should. I'm getting lots of angry Arsenal fans in my mentions at the moment. So, you're not missing out much. But yeah, subscribe to Ellie's channel. Make sure you like the video.
Thank you. And I did put your Twitter in the description box so people can find you. Joe, I'll add yours since you are a late addition to the stream. But Joe, thank you for joining, and let everybody know where they can find you.
No, I'm gonna echo Jay here. Actually, I am a subscriber, so I would say definitely like and subscribe. Follow Ellie. I would assume people know my monotone and dulcet tones at this point in time. But yeah, Joe Tweedy on socials, and obviously working with the London is Blue podcast as well. But echo Jay's sentiments. Follow Ellie; she's very, very good.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. So guys, despite it being a bit of a heavy stream today with a lot of difficult topics to talk about, I feel like we handled it pretty well, and I hope that this was informative for you. I'll continue to try to keep you as updated as possible as this news unfolds. And yeah, let's see how the game goes. I really don't care about it all that much, but let's see. Thank you for spending some of your evening with us and taking time to tune in. I really appreciate it. And until next time, I'm out. Bye.